The sun hung low over the dusty plains, painting the horizon gold and crimson. As Clara trudged toward the weathered ranch at the edge of Mesquite Valley, her boots, caked with dirt from days of walking, kicked up small clouds with each step. She was a wiry woman, no older than 30, with eyes that held both fire and weariness. Her pack, slung over one shoulder, contained little more than a worn blanket and a half-empty canteen. Clara had heard of the Double Bar Ranch, a sprawling operation that chewed up workers and spat them out. But she didn't care. "I'll sleep in the barn, just give me work," she'd said to every foreman from Tucson to Santa Fe, and she'd say it again here. The ranch gate loomed ahead, its iron sign rusted but proud. A man leaned against a post, his hat tipped low, watching her approach. He was tall, broad as a barn door, with skin like burnished copper and eyes that seemed to see through her. "You lost, lady?" he called, his voice deep as a canyon echo. Clara squared her shoulders. "I'm here for work. Don't need much, just a job in a corner to sleep in." The man, who the hands called Giant Apache, studied her. His real name was lost to the winds, but his presence was legend. "Works hard, pays thin." "You sure?" he asked. Clara nodded, her jaw tight. "I've roamed these parts, worked ranches, hauled freight. I don't break easy." Giant Apache's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You'll sleep," he said, cryptic, pointing toward the barn. Clara took it as agreement, not questioning the weight in his words. She stepped past him, her boots crunching gravel, unaware that his gaze followed her, heavy with something unspoken. The ranch was alive with the lowing of cattle, the creak of wood, and the distant laughter of men finishing their day. Clara's heart beat steady as she'd found a place, for now. The barn loomed large, its red paint peeling, smelling of hay and sweat. Inside, she found a corner, dropped her pack, and surveyed the space. It was rough, but it was shelter. She'd slept in worse. The other hands, a mix of grizzled veterans and wiry youths, eyed her curiously as they passed. "New blood." One muttered, "She won't last." Another scoffed. Clara ignored them, rolling out her blanket. She'd prove them wrong, just as she always had. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, itched to work. Tomorrow, she'd show them. But as night fell, Giant Apache's words echoed in her mind. "You'll sleep." There was a promise in them, or maybe a warning. She shook it off, lying on the straw, the stars visible through a crack in the roof. Sleep came slow, her thoughts tangled with the road behind her and the work ahead. The ranch was her chance to start over, to carve out something solid. She didn't know yet that Giant Apache saw more than a drifter in her, that he'd been waiting for someone like Clara, someone with fire enough to face what the Double Bar Ranch hid beneath its dusty surface. Dawn broke with a rooster's crow, sharp and insistent, pulling Clara from a restless sleep. The barn was cool, the air thick with the scent of hay and leather. She rose, brushing straw from her clothes, and stepped into the morning light. The ranch buzzed with activity. Hands roped cattle, mended fences, and hauled feed. Clara sought out Giant Apache, finding him near the corral, his massive frame silhouetted against the rising sun. "Where do I start?" she asked, her voice steady. He pointed to a pile of lumber. "Fence needs fixing on the north ridge. Take a horse, tools, and get it done." Clara nodded, grabbing a hammer and nails from the shed. The horse, a sturdy bay named Rusty, snorted as she saddled him. She rode out, the wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. The north ridge was a rugged stretch, dotted with mesquite trees and jagged rocks. Clara worked alone, her hands steady as she drove nails into posts. Sweat beaded on her brow, but she didn't pause. The other hands watched from a distance, their murmurs reaching her ears. "She's stubborn," one said. "Foolish," another grunted. Clara didn't care. She'd heard it all before, real woman or not. She'd outworked them. By noon, the sun was brutal, and her canteen was near empty. She wiped her face, squinting at the horizon. A shadow moved a rider, too far to make out. She ignored it, focusing on the fence. Hours passed, the pile of lumber shrinking as posts rose in neat rows. When she finished, the sun was dipping low. She rode back, her body aching but her spirit unbowed. Giant Apache was waiting at the corral. "Done?" he asked. "Done," Clara replied, dismounting. He nodded, his eyes unreadable. "Supper's in the bunkhouse. Eat." then sleep. She hesitated, sensing something in his tone, but headed to the bunkhouse. The hands were there, their talk loud and crude. Clara sat apart, eating beans and cornbread, ignoring their stares. "City girl playing cowboy," one sneered. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I've worked harder than you'll ever know." The room quieted, and she felt a shift of respect, maybe, or just surprise. Back in the barn, she lay on her blanket, the day's labor heavy in her bones. Giant Apache's words lingered again. "You'll sleep." What did he mean? The ranch felt alive at night, whispers of wind and distant coyote howls weaving through the darkness. Clara's dreams were restless, filled with shadows and the sense of something watching. She didn't know that Giant Apache stood outside, his eyes on the barn, as if guarding or waiting. The ranch held secrets, ones Clara would soon stumble into, and Giant Apache knew her arrival was no accident. Her strength, her fiery it was what the double bar needed, what he'd been seeking for years. The days blurred into a rhythm of sweat and toil. Clara rose before dawn, her hands finding work mending harnesses, herding cattle, cleaning stalls. The barn became her refuge, its rough walls a shield against the hand's skepticism. She proved herself daily, her work swift and precise. The man's taunts faded, replaced by grudging nods. Giant Apache watched, always from a distance, his presence a quiet force. Clara noticed he rarely spoke, but when he did, the hands listened. One morning, he called her to the main house, a squat adobe building with a sagging porch. Inside, the air was cool, the walls lined with old maps and faded photographs. "You're quick," he said, leaning against the table. "But the ranch tests more than hands." Clara frowned. "I can handle it." He handed her a map. "Its edge is worn. There's a canyon west of here. Cattle stray there. Find them, bring them back." She studied the map, noting the canyon's jagged lines. "Alone?" she asked. He nodded. "They'll manage." Clara saddled Rusty and rode out, the map tucked in her jacket. The canyon was a maze of red rock and thorny scrub, the air heavy with heat. She found tracks of cattle, fresh and followed them. Hours passed, the sun climbing, her canteen emptying. The tracks led to a narrow pass, where she found the cattle, 6 of them, huddled against a cliff. But something was off. The air felt thick, the shadows too sharp. A low rumble echoed, like distant thunder. Clara froze, her hand on Rusty's reins. The cattle bolted, and she spurred after them, her heart pounding. She rounded a bend and saw a flash flood, roaring down the canyon. She yanked Rusty back, barely escaping the wall of water. The cattle were gone, swept away. Shaken, she rode back, her clothes soaked, her mind racing. Giant Apache was at the gate, his face unreadable. "Lost them," she said, bracing for anger. He shook his head. "You're alive. That's enough." His words confused her, but she felt a spark of trust. That night, in the barn, she couldn't sleep. The flood, the canyon, Giant Apache's calm up it all gnawed at her. She rose, stepping outside, and saw him by the corral, staring at the stars. "What's this place hiding?" she asked, bold. He turned, his eyes glinting. "You'll see." "Sleep now." Clara returned to her blanket, the night heavy with questions. The ranch wasn't just land, it was a test, and she was only beginning to understand its stakes. Clara's days grew harder, the work relentless. The hands began to trust her, some even seeking her help with tasks. She learned their name as a Jake, a wiry kid with big dreams, Amos, a gruff old-timer with a limp Maria, the cook who sang while she worked. But Giant Apache remained a mystery. He was everywhere, yet apart, his words sparse but heavy. Clara caught him watching her, his gaze not unkind but piercing, as if he saw something she didn't. One evening, after a long day branding calves, he called her to the corral. "Ride with me," he said, mounting a black stallion. Clara followed on Rusty, the night cool and quiet. They rode to a mesa overlooking the ranch, the stars a blanket above. "Why'd you come here?" he asked, his voice low. Clara hesitated. "Needed work." "Needed a broken bar, a place." He nodded, as if he'd expected that. "This land's old, older than the ranch. It remembers." Clara frowned, sensing a story behind his words. "Remembers what?" she asked. He pointed to the horizon, where the canyon's shadow lay. "Loss, blood, promises." His tone was heavy, and Clara felt a chill. He spoke of the Apache, his people, who'd walked this land before the ranch, before the settlers. The canyon's theirs, he said. It takes what it wants. Clara thought of the flood. The cattle lost. You knew, she said, half accusing. He didn't deny it. You're strong. It didn't take you. They rode back in silence, Clara's mind spinning. The barn felt different that night, its shadows deeper. She lay awake, piecing together his words. The ranch wasn't just a job up, it was tied to something ancient, something alive. The next day, she worked harder, as if to prove herself to the land itself. The hands noticed, Jake joking she'd outwork a mule. But Clara felt the ranch watching, testing. At supper, Maria whispered to her, "Be careful. Giant Apache sees things others don't." Clara nodded, her resolve firm. She'd face whatever the ranch held. That night, she dreamed of the canyon, of voices in the wind, calling her name. She woke to find Giant Apache outside the barn, his silhouette stark against the dawn. "You'll sleep," he'd said, and she wondered if he meant more than rest. The ranch was pulling her in, and she wasn't sure she could resist. Weeks passed, and Clara became part of the ranch's pulse. She worked sunup to sundown, her hands half-air, her stride sure. The hands accepted her, even Amos, who'd called her city girl that first night. But the ranch's secrets gnawed at her. The canyon, Giant Apache's words, the strange weight in the air, it all lingered. One morning, Jake rushed into the barn, his face pale. "Rustlers," he said, "hit the south pasture last night. Took 20 head. Clara grabbed her gear, joining the hands as they saddled up. Giant Apache led them, his face grim. They rode hard, tracking the rustlers' trail through scrub and arroyos. The trail led to the canyon's edge, where hoof prints vanished into rock. "They're in there," Giant Apache said, his voice low. Clara felt a prickle of unease, remembering the flood. The hands hesitated, but she spurred Rusty forward. "I'm going," she said. Giant Apache's eyes met hers, a flicker of approval. They rode into the canyon, the walls closing in, the air thick. Hours later, they found the cattle, guarded by 3 men with rifles. Clara's heart raced, but she stayed calm, following Giant Apache's lead. A tense standoff ended when he spoke, his voice carrying a weight that made the rustlers lower their guns. They fled, leaving the cattle. Clara helped drive them back, her hands steady on the reins. At the ranch, the hands cheered, but Giant Apache pulled her aside. "You didn't flinch," he said. "Why?" Clara shrugged. "Had to be done." He nodded, handing her a small, carved stone. "Keep it. The canyon respects you now." She turned the stone over, its surface warm, etched with symbols she didn't understand. That night, in the barn, she studied it, feeling its weight. The ranch was changing her, or maybe she was changing it. The hands treated her differently now, with respect that felt earned. Maria told her stories of the canyon, of spirits that guarded it, of Giant Apaches tied to the land. Clara listened, her skepticism fading. The stone felt alive in her hand, a piece of the ranch's heart. She slept with it under her pillow, dreaming of red rock and endless skies. Giant Apache's words echoed, "You'll sleep." She was beginning to understand. The ranch wasn't just work, it was a call, and she'd answered. The seasons shifted, the air cooling, the days shorter. Clara's life settled into the ranch's rhythm, but the stone in her pocket was a constant reminder of its mysteries. She worked alongside Giant Apache more often now, learning his ways of the way he read the land, the sky, the cattle. He taught her to track, to listen to the wind, to feel the ranch's pulse. "You're part of it now," he said one evening, as they repaired a windmill. Clara didn't argue. She felt it too, the land's pull, its weight. But questions lingered. Why her? Why did Giant Apache trust her? One night, a storm rolled in, lightning cracking the sky. The hands huddled in the bunkhouse, but Clara, restless, stepped into the rain. Giant Apache was there, by the barn, unfazed by the downpour. "You feel it?" he said, not a question. Clara nodded, rain streaking her face. "What is it?" she asked. He told her then, his voice low, of the ranch's historia of battles fought, promises broken, spirits bound to the canyon. "The land chooses," he said. "It chose you." Clara's heart pounded. For what? He didn't answer, only pointed to the canyon. "You'll know." The next day, he took her there, riding deep into its heart. They stopped at a hidden cave, its walls painted with the ancient symbols. "This is home," he said, touching the rock. Clara felt the stone in her pocket hum, as if answering. He spoke of his ancestors, of a vow to protect the land, of a debt unpaid. "I've waited for someone to share it," he said. Clara's throat tightened. "Me?" He nodded. "You're strong. You listen." They rode back in silence, the weight of his words heavy. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The barn felt too small, the ranch too vast. She stepped outside, the storm's remnants dripping from the eaves. The stone burned in her hand, and she knew she was tied to this place now, to its secrets, its burdens. Giant Apache's trust was both gift and weight. She'd come seeking work, but found purpose. The canyon's call was clear, and she wouldn't turn back. Winter came, blanketing the ranch in frost. Clara's breath clouded as she worked, her hands chapped but steady. The hands relied on her now, her strength a quiet anchor. Giant Apache was her shadow, teaching her the land's deeper truths, how to read the stars, how to honor the spirits. The stone stayed with her, a talisman of her bond to the ranch. One day, a stranger arrived, a man in a fine coat, his eyes sharp. He spoke to Giant Apache, his words clipped, about land deeds and sales. The hands whispered to developers, wanting the ranch. Clara's got twisted. This was her home now. That night, she confronted Giant Apache. "You selling?" she asked. His face was stone. "Never." He told her the truth of the ranch was sacred, its heart in the canyon. The stranger's offer was a threat, one he'd faced before. "They'll come again," he said. Clara's resolve hardened. "We'll fight." He looked at her, pride in his eyes. "We will." The hands rallied, their loyalty to the ranch fierce. Clara led them, organizing patrols, watching for trouble. The stranger returned, with men and guns, demanding the land. Giant Apache stood firm, Clara at his side. A tense standoff followed, words sharp as knives. Clara spoke, her voice clear, of the ranch's worth, its soul. The stranger laughed, but his men wavered. Giant Apache's presence, Clara's fiery it was enough. The stranger left, promising to return. That night, the hands celebrated, but Clara felt the weight of what was coming. In the barn, she held the stone, its warmth steadying her. Giant Apache found her there. "You spoke for the land," he said. "It hears you." Clara nodded, understanding her role. The ranch was more than work, it was a legacy. She'd fight for it, as he did. Sleep came easier now. The stones hum a lullaby. She dreamed of the canyon, of standing with Giant Apache, guardians of a land that chose them both. Spring brought green to the valley, the ranch alive with new calves and budding mesquite. Clara was no longer the drifter who'd begged for work. She was the ranch's heart, its voice. The hands looked to her, and Giant Apache called her kin. The stranger's threat lingered, but Clara was ready. She rode the land daily, the stone in her pocket, her bond to the canyon unbreakable. One morning, Giant Apache called her to the mesa. "You've learned," he said. "The land trusts you." He gave her a new task to teach the hands, to pass on the canyon's truths. Clara accepted, her heart full. The barn, once her shelter, was now a symbol of her journey. She still slept there, but it was home, not hardship. The hands listened as she spoke of the land, its spirits, its strength. Jake, Amos, Maria, they all felt it, the ranch's pulse. Giant Apache watched, his role as guardian shared. The stranger returned, with papers and promises, but Clara faced him, her words fierce, backed by the hands. The canyon's shadow loomed, and the stranger left, defeated. Clara knew he'd try again, but the ranch was ready. That night, she stood with Giant Apache, the stars bright above. "You'll sleep," he said, and she smiled, understanding. Sleep was peace, trust, belonging. The barn welcomed her, its walls warm with memory. She laid down, the stone beside her, and slept deeply, the canyon's song in her dreams. The ranch was hers, as she was its, bound by work, fire, and a promise kept.